Why did the helicopters come for her, and why now? At precisely 10:47 a.m., the sky above Eagle Ridge University cracked open with a sound that didn't belong. Three dark silhouettes emerged, their rotors slicing through the Montana air like mechanical predators. Students froze mid-step, backpacks slung on one shoulder, coffee cups spilling as they rushed to windows and pulled out phones, thrilled by the spectacle. But Emma Hayes didn't move. She stood at her third-floor dorm window, body angled automatically behind the frame, eyes fixed on the descending Blackhawks. Cover and line of sight, an instinct so ingrained it happened without thought. Her American military history textbook slipped from her hands and hit the dorm floor with a dull thud, ignored. She didn't join the crowd pressing to the glass. She didn't cheer or record, because she knew what those helicopters were, and worse, she knew they were here for her. Only 2 hours earlier, Emma had been another anonymous freshman, art major, struggling to stay awake through Professor Miller's early morning lecture on Desert Storm. She had slouched in the back row, playing the role she had built so carefully, average, distracted, forgettable. "Mrs. Hayes, your thoughts." Professor Miller's voice had cut through the lecture hall, sharp as a commander's bark. Emma had raised her hand, face carefully blank. "I think they bombed too much. Weren't there, like, issues with civilians?" Her voice carried that manufactured uncertainty, the faint Valley Girl cadence, the performance of someone unsure. Miller's disappointment had been instant. A simplistic take, anyone else. What Emma hadn't said, what she had buried under the mask of mediocrity, was that she knew exactly how many civilians died in that campaign. She knew the models of aircraft, the capabilities of the F-117, the ordnance deployed, the assessment failures that haunted strategy for decades. She knew because she had seen the doctrine applied in Syria. She knew because she had lived it. But Emma Hayes, freshman art major, couldn't know those things. She couldn't afford to know those things. Her dorm room had told the same story of two halves, two lives. On one side, her roommate Rachel's chaos, vintage band posters, piles of clothes, Red Bull cans stacked like trophies, photos of high school friends and family vacations taped to the wall. On Emma's side, nothing. A bed with corners tight enough to bounce a quarter, a desk with color-coded pens and notebooks stacked by height. No photos, no keepsakes, no history. Except one. Hidden between pages of her psychology textbook, she kept a photograph. A much younger Emma standing beside her mother at Camp Pendleton. Both wore the same determined green eyes. On the back, her mother's handwriting, "My daughter, the true warrior. Your courage will light the way home." Captain Catherine Hayes had died when Emma was 16, not on the battlefield but in a hospital bed. Cancer, silent and cruel. Her last wish had been simple: don't follow in my footsteps. Live your own life. Emma had promised, and Emma had broken that promise. She had enlisted at 17. She had followed her mother's ghost. And now, 3 months after vanishing from a military hospital in Germany, after carving out the fragile identity of a freshman who laughed at cafeteria food and pretended midterms mattered, the helicopters had come to erase it all. The loudspeakers crackled across campus. "Attention, Eagle Ridge University. This is a security announcement. We are looking for freshman student Emma Hayes. This is not a drill. Emma Hayes, please report to the main quadrangle immediately." Her cover was gone. The ordinary life she had tried to construct was collapsing around her. Boots pounded the dorm hallway, sharp, disciplined, unmistakably military. Not students, not curious neighbors, soldiers. Emma breathed slowly, counting like she had been trained. 3 seconds in, hold, 5 seconds out. The girl in the sweatshirt and jeans, the one who blended into crowded classrooms, was gone. The soldier she had tried to bury was rising again, whether she wanted her to or not. When she opened the door, Sergeant Cooper was waiting. Mid-30s, hard lines carved by years in the field. Beside her stood a young lieutenant, Davis, hand resting near his sidearm. "Miss Hayes," Cooper said evenly. Colonel Marshall requests your presence on the quad. Phones flashed in the hallway. Students whispering, gasping. By nightfall, clips of Emma being escorted out of Maple Hall would go viral. The girl no one noticed suddenly becoming the center of attention. Outside, the quad was no longer a place of study. It had become a staging ground. 3 Blackhawks squatted in the grass, rotor wash flattening autumn leaves. Delta operators in full kit moved with precision, securing the perimeter. Campus security hovered at the edges, outmatched and confused. Faculty stood wide-eyed, students clustered behind cordons, the normal rhythms of campus life obliterated in minutes. At the center stood Colonel James Marshall. Emma's breath caught. He was older, hair more silver, lines etched deeper into his face, but his presence hadn't diminished. He was the man who had recruited her, the man who had once believed in her potential more than she had herself. His eyes swept the scene, sharp, restless, reading vulnerabilities before anyone else could see them. To others, he looked calm. To Emma, he looked ready for war. And when his eyes locked on her, something flickered there: relief, disappointment, calculation. "You've been difficult to find," he said, his voice carrying across the quad. "I'm not Sergeant Hayes anymore," she replied softly. "I'm just a student here." Marshall's gaze cut sharper. "Are you? Because the Sergeant Hayes I know wouldn't let civilians cluster near aircraft without safety protocols. She wouldn't ignore the tactical disadvantage of being surrounded. She wouldn't hesitate when helicopters landed." Her stomach tightened. He was right. Even pretending to be normal, her instincts had betrayed her. Then came the sound that shattered everything. Glass exploded from the second floor of Wilson Hall. Students screamed, scattering, their screams echoing between brick walls. Shards rained down onto the quad. Emma didn't flinch. Her head snapped upward, scanning angles, calculating trajectories. That sound, that whistle before the shatter, wasn't structural failure. It was a shot. "Sniper," she said flatly, her voice transformed. Calm, professional, a tone she hadn't used in months. Her finger pointed across the rooftops. Second floor, east corner of Wilson Hall. Trajectory at 32 degrees elevation. Source, clock tower. North-facing window. Remington 700, 400 meters. Marshall's head turned sharply. His team moved instantly. Orders barked through radios. Students shoved, panicked, but Emma's voice cut through the chaos. "Not the center, don't cluster them. South perimeter backs to the administration building. Smaller groups, controlled spacing. Broadcast system now. Track every faculty member. This is diversionary." The authority in her voice silenced hesitation. Soldiers obeyed without question. Campus security followed. And just like that, the mask of the freshman cracked. Victor Thompson, a weathered campus guard with eyes that saw too much, watched from the sidelines. He saw what the others, the way Emma shifted, in seconds, from overlooked student to battlefield commander. He knew that look. He had worn it himself in Vietnam. "Impressive," Marshall muttered under his breath. Emma didn't respond. Her body was moving faster than her mind, instincts overriding the part of her that still wanted to be ordinary. And when the crowd turned on her, students starring, her roommate Rachel's voice breaking through. "Emma, who are you really?" She looked at Rachel, saw the betrayal and confusion in her eyes. A friendship built on lies now exposed in the harsh light of truth. "I'm someone who used to be good at things I've been trying to forget," she said quietly. "But apparently, the past has other plans." Why did she run toward danger when everyone else was running away? The crack of breaking glass still echoed across the quad, but Emma was already moving, mind working in fragments and angles. Panic rippled through the students, bodies pushing and colliding, their voices rising in a terrified chorus. Marshall barked commands, his operators spreading out with the efficiency of men who had drilled for this countless times. But it was Emma's voice that cut through the confusion first. "South perimeter, smaller clusters, keep sightlines clear." Even as her words took root, She knew she had crossed a line. She had revealed too much. The girl who made terrible coffee in the dorm kitchen wasn't supposed to know how to control a panicked crowd, wasn't supposed to calculate sniper angles in seconds. She wasn't supposed to sound like this. But survival never cared about appearances. Marshall studied her with that unreadable mix of respect and calculation. "Still sharp," he muttered. His eyes told her what his words didn't. "I knew you couldn't bury it." The crowd thinned just enough for Emma to spot Rachel at the edge, pale, wide-eyed, her phone forgotten in her hand. Their eyes locked. And in that look, Rachel asked the question out loud that Emma had dreaded for months. "Who are you really?" Emma's chest tightened. The lies she had woven so carefully unraveled in seconds. She wanted to run, wanted to grab Rachel and promise safety, to insist that none of this had anything to do with her. But the sniper's shot had already dragged her past the point of pretending. "I'm someone who thought she could leave her past behind," she admitted, voice carrying across the quad. "But the past doesn't let go that easily." Before Rachel could respond, the sharp crack of a rifle tore the air. A chunk of brick exploded inches from Emma's head. The crowd screamed again. Emma dropped low, scanning the rooftops. Not an accident. This wasn't just disruption, it was a test. Someone wanted to see her move, to watch her instincts betray her cover. Marshall's team scrambled toward the clock tower, radios flaring. But Emma's trained eye caught what they missed. The muzzle protruding slightly from the north-facing window, a rookie mistake, but enough. "Third-level north window, bolt action suppressed. Amateurs don't conceal the barrel," she called. Her words weren't a suggestion, they were a verdict. Marshall's team adjusted instantly, angling their approach. Emma drew a breath, adrenaline burning through her veins like fire she had tried for months to smother. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be Sergeant Hayes anymore. Yet here she was, guiding men with years more rank, her instincts too deeply etched to suppress. And then movement on the science building rooftop. Another figure, dark clothing, setting up a rifle. Without thinking, Emma grabbed the sidearm from Marshall's holster. A Sig Sauer P320 standard issue, too far for most, but she wasn't most. She exhaled slow, trigger squeeze steady, one shot. The figure crumpled behind the HVAC unit. The students who had thought they knew her screamed in a new way, not in fear of an unseen sniper, but at the girl they thought was ordinary, firing a military weapon like she had done it 1,000 times. Rachel stumbled forward, voice shaking. "Emma, my God, what are you?" Emma turned, heart torn between instincts and the fragile life she had tried to build. She holstered the weapon at the small of her back, a motion so natural, so automatic, that it betrayed more truth than words ever could. "Not someone you thought you knew," she whispered. Marshall's voice cut through, target secured. His team had taken the tower, radios confirmed, a decoy post, cigarette butts, food wrappers, observation notes, empty. Emma's blood ran cold. It's misdirection. The explosions, the rooftop, they weren't here to kill. They were here to study me. Marshall's jaw tightened. They wanted to see if you'd revert. She knew he was right. And worse, someone now had fresh intelligence on how she moved, how she thought, how she led. Rachel's voice broke the silence, sharp with hurt. "You lied to me. 3 months you lied about everything. Were you even my friend?" Emma's throat tightened. Of all the dangers circling her now, this was the wound she hadn't prepared for. She met Rachel's eyes, the girl who had shared late-night conversations, complained about cafeteria food, traded secrets Emma had pretended to match with half-truths. "I wanted to be," Emma said softly. "But the person you let into your life wasn't real. I don't know if she ever was." Rachel's face twisted. Hurt, betrayal, something deeper Emma didn't want to name. Marshall stepped closer, cutting through the personal wreckage with brutal necessity. "Hayes, inside, now." The administration building swallowed them, the oak-paneled conference room suddenly suffocating. President Westfield sat at the head of the table, his polished calm fraying. Beside him, Victor Thompson, silent, watchful, carrying that air of a man who had seen war long before these students were born. Westfield's voice cracked with disbelief as files landed on the table. There's no record, no high school diploma, nothing adds up. Who is she? Marshall's reply was clipped, matter of fact. Sergeant Emma Hayes, U.S. Army Intelligence, enlisted at 17, deployed before she was 18, embedded in hostile networks most of you wouldn't survive a day inside. The words hung like smoke in the room. Westfield stared. She's 19. Emma felt the weight of their stares. The truth pressed against her chest like armor she couldn't remove. Why are you hiding here? Victor Thompson's gravel voice cut through. His eyes, sharp beneath his years, didn't accuse. They searched. Because sometimes being good at something doesn't mean you want to keep doing it, Emma answered. There's a difference between being capable of violence and wanting to live inside it. The room fell into a silence so thick it pulsed. For once, Emma hadn't crafted a lie. Then Marshall's phone buzzed. His eyes darkened as he read. He looked up and the space between them shifted. Sergeant Hayes, your clearance is reinstated. We have a developing crisis. Emma's stomach dropped. She had known this moment would come. She had just hoped she could outrun it. What kind of crisis? The kind that doesn't care if you want to be normal. The kind that could kill 50,000 people if we fail. And before Emma could breathe, before she could cling to the fragile identity she had fought to build, the sound of explosions tore through the campus again. Windows rattled, sirens howled, smoke curled against the blue Montana sky. Emma grabbed Marshall's weapon without asking. This time, there was no hesitation. She was already running toward the chaos. What happens when the past you tried to bury explodes back into your life? The blast rattled the windows of the administration building. Dust sifted from the ceiling tiles. Alarms blared. Students screamed somewhere beyond the walls, their voices sharp with panic. Emma was already moving, Marshall's Sig Sauer gripped in her hands. Feet pounding down the marble hallway, each strike echoing against stone, chasing the second detonation that shook the quad. She didn't think. She didn't weigh choices. Training had returned like a tide she couldn't hold back. By the time she burst through the double doors, the world outside had transformed. Fires burned in neat, deliberate pockets across the campus lawn, precision strikes, small charges placed for disruption, not destruction. Students scattered in every direction, their earlier curiosity replaced by sheer terror. Sirens wailed, radios crackled, boots thudded against pavement. And on the rooftop of the science building, Emma saw him. A shadowed figure setting a rifle on its bipod, calm, methodical. She raised the SIG. The range was long, far too long for a handgun, but her body didn't hesitate, breath steady. Shoulders locked, trigger squeezed. One shot. The figure folded, collapsing behind the HVAC unit. The recoil traveled through her arm like memory. The sound echoed like confession. Around her, students froze, staring. Phones captured the moment in high-definition clarity. The art student who had been nobody, firing like a soldier who had never left the battlefield. Rachel's voice tore through the noise, sharp with confusion and betrayal. Emma, my God, what are you? Emma holstered the pistol at the small of her back, a movement so practiced, so natural, that it betrayed every truth she had tried to hide. I'm sorry, she said softly, but the words felt like ash. Marshall's team was moving, securing the science building. Reports streamed through radios, but what came back wasn't relief. Sir Tower cleared, no shooter, just evidence, observation post only. Emma's pulse quickened. She knew what it meant even before she spoke. Decoy, classic misdirection. The explosions were noise. The rooftop shooter, a disposable piece. This wasn't about casualties. Marshall's eyes narrowed. Then what was it about? Her gaze swept the quad, the panicked crowd, the dozens of phones recording her every movement. She swallowed hard. Me, they came for me. For a heartbeat, the weight of her words hung in the smoky air. Then reality surged back, orders shouted, students herded, tactical lines reinforced. But Emma felt the shift inside herself. This wasn't coincidence. It wasn't random. Someone knew who she was, and they wanted her exposed. Minutes later, the conference room doors slammed shut behind them. Oak paneling, polished table, portraits of university founders staring down like silent judges. It might have been a place for academic debate, but now it had become a command post. President Westfield sat at the head of the table, face pale, eyes darting between the classified files spread before him. Victor Thompson leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his silence carrying the weight of old wars. And across from Emma, Colonel Marshall studied her like she was both asset and liability. "Miss Hayes," Westfield began, his voice thin with disbelief, "your admission file is a fabrication. High school transcripts fake. Enrollment records false. Who exactly are you?" Emma said nothing. Her silence stretched across the room like barbed wire. Marshall filled the void. "She's Sergeant Emma Hayes, U.S. Army Intelligence, enlisted at 17, deployed before most of your students finished prom." Westfield's lips parted in disbelief. "She's 19. Emma clenched her fists in her lap. She hated hearing it laid bare like that. Her life reduced to timelines, operations, commendations that read like medals but felt like scars. Victor Thompson's gravel voice cut through. "Why are you hiding in a dormitory, Sergeant? Why not back in uniform?" Emma met his gaze. His eyes weren't accusing. They were searching like one soldier to another. "Because being good at something doesn't mean you want to keep doing it," she said. "Because I wanted to know if I could be someone else, someone normal." The room fell silent. For once she hadn't lied. Then Marshall's phone buzzed. He read the message and his expression darkened. When he looked up, the air shifted. "Sergeant Hayes, your clearance is reinstated. We have a situation." Emma's chest tightened. She had known. She had always known. The question was never if they'd drag her back, it was when. "What kind of situation?" "The kind that makes 50,000 dead a possibility," Marshall replied grimly. "The kind where we don't have the luxury of letting you be a student." Emma's pulse hammered. 50,000. She had seen death in numbers before, but never like that. Never so vast, so faceless. She took a breath. "Brief me." The doors shut. A small device on the table hummed to life, jamming surveillance. And in the suffocating quiet, Marshall said two words that pulled her back into the life she had tried to abandon. "Operation Sandstorm." Emma froze. Memories surged, the smell of dust, the taste of adrenaline, the screaming that still echoed in her nightmares. "You were embedded in Mustafa Alford's network for 14 weeks, Marshall continued, "gathering intelligence, feeding us details. Your extraction nearly killed you, but the intel led to a strike we thought ended him." Emma's voice was flat. "He's alive." "Yes, and worse, he's rebuilt. He's acquired VX nerve agent from old Iraqi stockpiles, colorless, odorless, fatal by skin contact. He's planning coordinated attacks in Europe, Paris, Berlin, London, transportation hubs, peak hours." Emma's throat tightened. She had studied VX in training. A single drop could kill. Whole crowds could be erased in minutes. "Casualty estimates." Marshall's jaw hardened. "Conservative, 50,000. Could be higher if he strikes all 3 cities at once." Emma felt the number press against her ribs. She pictured commuters on trains, children at stations, families waiting for arrivals. Lives measured not in statistics but in faces. And beneath it all, she felt the old guilt rise again, the weight of Sandstorm. "The village wasn't supposed to be there," she whispered. Marshall's gaze softened slightly. He knew, of course he knew. "The review board cleared you, it wasn't your fault." Emma shook her head. The memory clawed at her, the mud brick houses, the airstrike she had called in with confidence, the flames that had taken 17 civilians, 7 of them children. Her voice cracked. I was the one who confirmed the coordinates. I was the one who gave the order. That's why I ran, Colonel. Not because I couldn't handle it, but because I realized I could. I could make that call without hesitation, and I didn't want to be that person anymore. The silence in the room was unbearable. Even Marshall couldn't answer that. Victor Thompson's voice broke it, low and steady. You're not just that person. None of us are only what war makes us, but you don't get to pretend it never happened. You stitch it into who you are, or it keeps bleeding forever. Emma swallowed hard. His words sank into the cracks she had been trying to seal with lies and textbooks and dorm routines. Maybe he was right. Maybe she couldn't keep cutting away the part of her that had been forged in blood and sand. Marshall leaned forward. Alfred knows you're alive. He sent men to this campus to test you, to force our hand. He wants you back in the game, and you're the only one who can stop him before those attacks happen. Emma's hands trembled under the table. The choice loomed before her: cling to the fragile, broken dream of normal life, or step back into the shadows that had already claimed her once. She thought of Rachel's pale face, her hurt words. She thought of her mother's handwriting on that photo: your courage will light the way home. And in that moment, Emma knew there was no way out. She looked Marshall in the eye. When do we leave? What do you call the moment when you stop pretending and step back into who you really are? The answer came to Emma Hayes as she watched the fire smolder across Eagle Ridge's quad. The smoke carried the last traces of her other life, the 3 months she had spent as a student, pretending she was normal, pretending she was someone Rachel could trust. She turned from the windows, the cig still heavy in her hand. Colonel Marshall was already moving, barking into his radio, his operators streaming toward the source of the blasts. But his eyes lingered on Emma, reading the truth in her stance, in the way she cradled the weapon. She hadn't hesitated. She hadn't flinched. The freshman mask was gone. Within the hour, the campus had transformed into a secure perimeter. Students herded into shelters. Helicopters repositioned. Soldiers combed through smoke and debris. Reporters would descend by nightfall, hungry for the story of a quiet art student turned something else entirely. Emma was escorted into the administration building again, this time not as a runaway but as an operative reclaimed. The conference room felt colder now. President Westfield protested, his voice strained. She's enrolled here. You can't just... Emma cut him off. Yes, they can. My reserve status means I can be recalled at any time. She looked Marshall dead in the eye. Brief me. Westfield's mouth snapped shut. Thompson, still leaning against the wall, nodded once, the acknowledgement of a veteran who understood what it meant to stop running. The briefing was merciless. Operation Sandstorm, Mustafa Alford, VX nerve agent, 50,000 projected casualties, 3 cities. The numbers blurred in Emma's ears, but the images seared into her chest. Crowds at train stations, families, children, oblivious, vulnerable. She thought of the mud brick village again, the 17 faces she could never erase. She thought of how easily she had called that strike and how the guilt had swallowed her whole afterward. Now they wanted her back, not as Emma the freshman, not as someone trying to piece together a normal life. They wanted Sergeant Hayes, the operative who had survived infiltration and extraction, who had memorized Alfred's methods like a second language. She had every reason to say no. She had every reason to walk away. But when she pictured the stations in Paris, Berlin, London, she knew she couldn't. And so at dusk, she boarded the transport. The C-17 hummed beneath her boots, its cavernous belly filled with soldiers and gear. The thrum of engines vibrated through metal walls, a sound that once meant purpose, now tasted like inevitability. She sat across from Marshall, who buried himself in mission files on a tablet. Around them, operators checked weapons, adjusted kit, spoke in quiet voices. Emma sat in silence, back straight, hands folded, as if posture alone could hold her together. She didn't belong in the dorm anymore, but she didn't feel she belonged here either. The transport lifted, the ground falling away, Eagle Ridge shrinking into shadows. Emma's chest ached as she imagined Rachel on campus, scrolling through news on her phone, seeing her face in headlines, realizing just how much had been hidden. She had left Rachel with nothing but questions, and Emma hated herself for it. Hours stretched, the cabin dimmed. She tried to close her eyes, but memories pressed in: the mission, the airstrike, the faces of civilians she had consigned to death with a calm voice and steady hands. The after-action report had called it an intelligence failure. The review board had cleared her, but none of it mattered. The guilt belonged to her. Marshall broke the silence. "We need to talk about Syria." Emma's eyes snapped open, muscles tightening. "That's classified." "Not anymore." He slid the tablet across. "All redactions lifted. Read." She didn't want to. She had buried those words, those cold phrases that documented the worst day of her life. But her eyes skimmed anyway. Coordinates, strike authorization, 17 civilian casualties, no enemy presence. Her voice was hollow. The village wasn't supposed to be there. The intel was 6 months old. Refugees had come back. Marshall's eyes softened just barely. "The failure wasn't yours." Emma shoved the tablet back. "I was the one who confirmed the coordinates. I gave the order. That's why I ran. Not because I couldn't handle it, because I realized I could." Her voice cracked. "And I didn't want to be that person anymore." Silence followed, heavy, unbearable. Finally Marshall spoke. "Is that why you chose art?" Emma blinked. "What?" "You could have studied anything, but you chose art, creation instead of destruction." Her throat tightened. "Because art builds. It doesn't tear down. It doesn't calculate casualties. It doesn't leave you wondering if you killed the wrong people." She paused, voice barely a whisper. "I thought maybe if I surrounded myself with creation, I could forget the destruction." "And yet here you are," Marshall said. Emma's eyes locked on his. "Because the alternative is worse. Because 50,000 people don't deserve to die just so I can pretend I'm normal." For a moment his expression softened. He leaned back, tablet forgotten. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this, that we had to pull you back." Emma swallowed hard. She wanted to hate him, but she couldn't. "So am I," she whispered. The engines droned. Hours passed. She dozed in fragments, haunted by faces. When she finally woke, Marshall was still across from her, eyes closed but posture upright, like even in sleep he carried the weight of command. Emma shifted in her seat, her mother's photograph hidden in her pocket. She traced the edges with her thumb, hearing her voice again. "Your courage will light the way home." For months she thought home meant Eagle Ridge, meant a dorm room with messy posters and midnight laughter. Now she wasn't so sure. Maybe home wasn't a place. Maybe it was surviving yourself. The descent into Andrews jolted her from her thoughts. The base sprawled below, runways glowing under floodlights, hangars buzzing even at this late hour. The transport touched down, heavy tires screaming against tarmac, slowing under power. Inside a secured hangar, Emma stepped out into a world she knew too well. Screens glowed with satellite imagery. Analysts shouted into headsets. Military insignia from multiple agencies dotted uniforms. The air hummed with urgency. Marshall led her forward. "Welcome to Operation Gatekeeper." Emma scanned the room. French, German, British officers, American Special Operations, Homeland Security, everyone converging on one nightmare. And then a voice from the crowd. "Hayes." Emma turned. A figure pushed through the cluster, Captain Sarah Rivera, a woman with sharp eyes, steady presence, and a rare, genuine smile. They had trained together, survived missions together. One of the few Emma had ever dared to call a friend. They clasped hands, firm and brief. "Didn't expect to see you here," Rivera said. "Didn't expect to be here," Emma replied quietly. Rivera nodded. eyes soft with understanding. They pulled me from Colombia when this broke, said they needed chemical containment expertise. Emma swallowed. Then it's real. It's real, Rivera confirmed. Emma followed Marshall deeper into the operations center, her eyes sweeping over the screens. Surveillance feeds from Europe, schematics, maps, intercepted comms, and on one screen faces she recognized. Alfred's lieutenants, men she had eaten with, spoken to, pretended loyalty to while memorizing their routines. And among them, Nasir Rahman, the logistics man she had last known in Turkey. Her heart stuttered. He's in Paris. Marshall glanced at her. You're sure? Emma nodded, eyes glued to the grainy footage. That's him. If Rahman is in Europe, it means the network is already in place. They're moving. Her voice grew quiet, the words almost to herself. The attacks are closer than we think. For the first time since she boarded the helicopters back in Montana, Emma allowed herself a flicker of fear. Not for herself, but for the thousands of people in train stations, airports, crowded streets, unaware that death was already being carried into their cities. And in that fear she felt the truth crystallize. There was no going back. What happens when the only person who sees the pattern is the one who never wanted to look again? The operations center at Andrews buzzed with restless urgency. Screens flickered with satellite feeds and maps. Analysts murmured into headsets. Officers moved between stations with clipped authority. Every corner of the room hummed with tension, as though the air itself understood that 50,000 lives hung on the accuracy of every pixel. Emma Hayes stood at the edge, shoulders squared, hands clasped behind her back. She tried to appear detached, but her pulse betrayed her. Her eyes scanned each display, every feed, every scatter of data and the old instincts. The ones she had tried to bury beneath dorm assignments and cafeteria chatter were already surfacing. She recognized the comm structure, the staggered timing of courier movements, the deliberate redundancy in logistics, Alfred's signature. She had studied it too long, memorized it too deeply. Marshall leaned close, his voice low. You see something? Emma's throat tightened. Yes, and I don't want to. Want doesn't matter, Marshall said flatly. Say it. Her eyes tracked across 3 screens, truck movements in Eastern Europe, wire transfers flagged by financial intel, a sudden spike in chatter near Berlin's Tegel district. To others, the dots looked random. To her, they lined up like coordinates. They're setting Berlin as the pivot, Emma said quietly. Paris and London, those are noise. Secondary operations meant to stretch response. The real strike will be Berlin. They'll hit a hub, transit, somewhere crowded, choke points built into the architecture. It'll look like 3 cities under attack, but Berlin is the artery. Kill the artery and the rest of the body dies. Her words silenced the nearest analysts. They stared at her, brows furrowed, some skeptical, some shaken. Marshall, though, didn't flinch. Evidence, he pressed. Emma's voice steadied as she pointed. The trucks here loaded in Prague, rerouted through Dresden, all within 2 hours of each other. No dispersal, too tight. Then Rahman spotted in Paris. He's logistics. He doesn't lead, he places, which means Paris is a decoy. Berlin is the spine. One of the analysts frowned. That's speculation. Emma's eyes hardened. It's recognition. I lived inside his network for 14 weeks. This is Alfred's rhythm. You want to treat data like theory? Fine. But in this case, theory gets people killed. The room held its breath. Finally, Marshall cut in. Flag Berlin as priority 1. Shift surveillance resources. Double German liaison. The analyst hesitated, then obeyed. Screens reoriented. Feeds from Berlin sharpened. Emma exhaled slowly. She had just stepped deeper into the fire. Every word tethered her tighter to the mission. Every observation dragged her further from the girl she had pretended to be. Captain Rivera approached, folding her arms, expression unreadable. They'll resent you, she murmured. Emma's brows knit. For what? For being right when they were. Rivera's gaze softened. But that's why they need you. Emma swallowed. The praise tasted like ash. She didn't want to be needed like this. Not for death. Not for dismantling men she had once sat across from, memorizing their smiles, their lies, their laughter. Hours blurred. Emma immersed herself in the flood of intel, too immersed. She traced supply routes, anticipated fallback lines, mapped storage facilities against civilian density. She caught things others missed. An overlooked courier in Warsaw, a rental van in Lichtenberg, a coded phrase buried in intercepted Arabic. And with every discovery, guilt gnawed at her. Because she remembered the village. She remembered sitting in a dark operations room much like this, her voice calm as she authorized an airstrike. She had been sure then, too. Certain. Conviction in her chest. And 17 civilians had died for her certainty. Now she caught her reflection in the glass of a satellite screen. A young woman with hollow eyes, lips pressed tight, shoulders rigid. She hated that she looked more like Sergeant Hayes than Emma the freshman. She whispered to herself, too softly for anyone else to hear, "Don't let me be wrong again." Marshall noticed. He always noticed. He said nothing, but his gaze lingered just long enough for her to feel the weight of command pressing against her back. By dawn, the room had thinned. Analysts rotated out. Officers collapsed into brief naps at their desks. Emma remained, eyes dry, nerves raw. Victor Thompson shuffled in, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He set one by her elbow without asking. "You don't sleep either," Emma said quietly. "Not when kids are in danger," he answered, sipping his. His weathered face creased as he studied her. "You blame yourself for that village." Emma's chest tightened. "They told me it wasn't my fault." "Doesn't matter what they told you," Thompson said. "What matters is what you carry. The trick isn't to stop carrying it. The trick is learning how to carry it without breaking." Emma stared at him, words trapped in her throat. "You think you're broken," Thompson continued. "But I've seen broken. Broken is when a man stops caring. You care too much. That's your burden and your gift." For a moment, Emma couldn't speak. Then, softly, "I don't know if I can do this again." Thompson's voice was steady. "That's exactly why you can." She turned back to the screens, her eyes burning. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that guilt could coexist with purpose. Hours later, Marshall returned, his expression sharp with urgency. "Hayes, we've got movement." Emma straightened instantly. "Where?" He pointed at a live feed. A warehouse district outside Berlin. 2 trucks arriving, offloading barrels into an unmarked facility. Emma's blood chilled. "That's it, that's the staging ground." "German police want confirmation before they breach," Marshall said. Emma's eyes locked on the barrels. She knew the dimensions, knew the markings faintly visible even through grainy footage. VX. "If you wait for confirmation, you'll confirm it with body bags," she said. "You need to move, now." The room erupted, analysts arguing, officers on phones, Marshall issuing rapid orders. Emma felt her chest tighten again, the cycle repeating, her conviction against their hesitation. And for the second time in her life, she prayed she wasn't wrong. As the strike package scrambled, Emma sat in the dim glow of the operations center, her heart pounding. She thought of Berlin commuters, of children waiting at school doors, of the ripple effect of lives intersecting unknowingly with terror. And she thought of the village again, the 17, the children. Her whisper came again, trembling, "Don't let me kill the wrong people again." No one heard it, but the silence inside her answered. Why does the truth always come too late? The convoy rolled through Berlin's industrial outskirts under a slate-gray dawn. Streets lay empty, warehouses casting long shadows across cracked pavement. German police vans flanked the Delta Force trucks, engines low, lights off. Every man wore body armor, rifles slung tight. And in the middle of it all sat Emma Hayes, helmeted, vest strapped, Marshall at her side. She hadn't wanted to come. She had wanted to remain in the operations center, watching from the safety of surveillance screens. But Marshall had insisted. You know their methods. You'll see what others miss. Now the armored silence pressed against her ribs. She stared out the slit window at graffiti-scrawled walls, her chest heavy. The warehouse loomed ahead, its corrugated iron roof sagging, its brick facade blackened from years of neglect. Ordinary on the outside. But inside could be enough VX to drown a city in silence. Her palms sweated inside her gloves. She flexed her hands, grounding herself in motion. She told herself this was Syria. This wasn't the village. This time they were certain. But certainty was what had killed 17 civilians last time. The convoy halted. Orders crackled through radios. German SCK officers spread along the perimeter. Delta operators stacked at the side entrance. Marshall's voice cut through. On my mark. Emma crouched low, heart hammering, every muscle vibrating with the instinct to run and the refusal to move. The door blew with a muted charge. Splinters flew. Operators surged inside. Darkness swallowed them. The first shots rang out seconds later, short bursts, sharp and controlled. Not the panic spray of amateurs. Emma ducked low, sidearm ready, following Marshall into the gloom. The warehouse smelled of oil and damp concrete. Rows of crates stacked high. Forklifts abandoned mid-aisle. Shadows darted between cover. Emma glimpsed figures in dark clothing, Alfred's men, returning fire. She pressed to a crate, breath shallow. Marshall barked orders, his voice calm under fire. German officers advanced on the flanks. Muzzle flashes lit the cavernous space. And then Emma saw it, barrels stacked against the far wall, stenciled markings faint under dust. The dimensions were right. The arrangement matched the footage. Her stomach dropped. VX barrels north wall, she shouted. Operators shifted instantly, fire redirected, movements sharper. The firefight surged. Emma's chest tightened as she crouched lower, vision tunneling. If a single round punctured one of those barrels, it wouldn't just be this team. The whole block would die choking. She steadied her breathing, weapon up. One target broke cover, she fired. The man fell, her chest clenched. Another target moved, she fired again. Another body dropped. Each shot echoed inside her skull. She didn't even know their names. She didn't know if they believed in Alfred's cause or if they were desperate men paid in promises. She only knew she was killing them, one by one, to stop something worse. The fight ended in minutes, though it felt like hours. Silence fell, broken only by the drip of water from a broken pipe. Emma rose slowly, weapon low. Her ears rang, her heart pounded. Marshall's voice cut through. Secure the barrels. Operators approached cautiously, scanning for traps. One knelt, flashlight beam sweeping the markings. His voice cracked through radio. Sir, these aren't VX. Emma's stomach turned. What? Marshall barked. They're decoys, fertilizer, oil drums, empty. The words punched the air from Emma's lungs. She staggered back a step, mind racing. It was Syria all over again. Wrong coordinates, wrong intelligence. Only this time the failure wasn't airstrike miscalculation. It was deliberate. They wanted us here, she whispered. They staged this. Marshall's eyes darkened. A diversion. Emma's pulse surged. If Berlin is the decoy, then Paris or London is the real target. They played us. Before Marshall could reply, a scream split the silence. Operators dragged a captive from the shadows, a man in his 30s, beard unkempt, wrists bound. Blood streaked his temple. He spat at the floor, eyes burning. Emma froze, she knew that face. Yasser, she whispered. Marshall glanced at her. You know him. Her voice was tight. I ate with him in Aleppo. He handled safe houses. He was Rahman's second. Yasser's gaze snapped to her, recognition flashing. A bitter smile spread across his face. The ghost returns, he hissed. The girl who ran. Emma's chest ached. 14 weeks inside their network pretending to be one of them. She had laughed at his jokes, listened to his stories, all of it theater. But here he was, chained and bleeding, and still he looked at her like he knew her soul. Marshall stepped forward. "Where's the VX?" Yasser's laugh was sharp, mocking. "Too late." Emma crouched in front of him, meeting his eyes. "Where, Yasser? You know what that gas does, you've seen it. Children, families. You'll be dead in a week's time, maybe sooner. Don't carry that with you. Tell me where." Yasser studied her, his smile fading. "And you, do you carry them, the ones you burned?" Emma's breath caught. He knew. He knew about the village. Her voice faltered. "That's not." 17, Yasser interrupted. 7 children, you killed them. Do you still dream their names? Or do you bury them under your new lies? Her vision blurred, guilt crashing down like shrapnel. Marshall's voice cut through, harsh. "Hayes, stand down." Emma swallowed hard, forcing steel into her voice. "Yasser, where's the gas?" He leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear. "London," he whispered. Emma's blood froze. She jerked back, eyes wide. "It's London." Marshall snapped orders into his radio. "Redirect. Immediate priority, London. All assets shift." The room erupted with motion. Operators shouting, radios flaring, Germans demanding answers. Emma staggered back, her chest heaving. London. The city she had once walked during leave. The place her mother had dreamed of visiting, dragging Emma through guidebooks before the cancer stole her strength. The thought of that city choked in silence by VX was unbearable. Marshall gripped her shoulder hard. "You just saved thousands. Don't lose focus now." But Emma's thoughts spun. Yasser's words cut deeper than any mission report. 17, 7 children, she could hear them again, smell the smoke. Was she about to repeat the same pattern? Conviction followed by blood. She pressed a hand against her helmet, eyes shut tight. Her whisper barely audible, "Don't let me be wrong again." When she opened her eyes, the warehouse looked different. The crates, the shadows, the faces of the dead, everything felt heavier, as if the ghosts of the village had followed her here. And yet the path was set. London was next. How do you keep breathing when every second could be the one that ends thousands of lives? The transport shuddered as it cut through the night sky toward London. Inside, the cabin hummed with tension, operators rechecking weapons, analysts hunched over tablets streaming live feeds, Marshall packing like a caged predator. Emma sat strapped against the cold fuselage, helmet in her lap, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles ached. The image of Yasser's bloodied face haunted her. London, he had whispered. The word had lodged in her chest like a blade. She wanted to believe it was the truth. But she also knew men like him, trained to twist the knife, to plant doubt, to watch their enemies unravel from the inside. She remembered Syria. She remembered being so sure. And she remembered the children. Her stomach turned. She bent forward, elbows on knees, whispering to herself so quietly no one could hear, "Don't let me be wrong again." Captain Rivera slid onto the bench beside her. She didn't speak at first, just sat, steady presence cutting through the noise. Finally, she said, "You haven't blinked in 30 minutes. That's not focus, Emma. That's punishment." Emma didn't look up. "Maybe I deserve it." "Deserve what?" Emma's voice cracked. 17 lives, I was so sure, and I was wrong. Rivera's tone softened. "And if you hadn't called that strike, and it had been a weapons cache instead, if those civilians hadn't been there." Emma closed her eyes, but they were there. Rivera's hand rested lightly on Emma's shoulder. "You're not God, Emma. You don't get to know everything. You only get to choose with what you have. That's all any of us ever do." Emma finally looked at her, eyes burning. "And if I'm wrong again, if London burns because I pointed us the wrong way?" Rivera's gaze didn't waver. "Then at least it burns with you fighting to stop it, and not with you hiding in a dorm pretending you were never here." Emma swallowed hard. The words stung, but beneath them was truth. The engines roared louder as they began descent. Marshall barked, 20 minutes out. Briefing now. Maps unfurled across a makeshift table. Surveillance images projected onto the bulkhead. Targets are narrowed to 3 sites, Marshall said. King's Cross Station, Heathrow Cargo Terminals, Canary Wharf Financial District. High traffic, high symbolic value. Emma's eyes darted over the images. She had walked King's Cross once with her mother, lost in the rush of commuters. She had sat in the glass towers of Canary Wharf during an intel debrief years ago, the skyline gleaming. Each location was a living artery. Striking any of them with VX would carve silence into the heart of the city. Her pulse quickened. She leaned closer, tracing routes with her finger. "No," she said softly. "Not King's Cross, too obvious. Heathrow, possible, but Alfred prefers symbolism layered with utility. Canary Wharf, it gives him both. Collapse financial confidence, cripple transport, spread panic. He'd choose Canary." Marshall studied her, expression unreadable. "You're certain?" Emma's throat tightened. The word certain tasted like ash. She had been certain before. She had been wrong before. Her silence stretched. Finally she whispered, "As certain as I can be." Marshall nodded once. "Then we move on Canary." The decision fell heavy in the cabin. Orders relayed. Weapons checked again. The operators around her moved with precision, but Emma felt the weight pressing down. What if she was wrong? What if London's dead lay on her shoulders next? The transport touched down at RAF Northolt under the cover of darkness. Convoys waited. Within minutes, they were speeding through London streets, sirens muted, blue lights flashing only in bursts. Emma sat rigid, the city lights blurring past the armored windows. She thought of her mother, how she had dreamed of this city, of its bridges and museums and theaters, how she had whispered, "Someday we'll walk here together." Cancer had stolen that dream, and now VX threatened to turn London into a mausoleum. The convoy braked hard. Canary Wharf rose ahead, steel and glass towers gleaming against the night sky. But the beauty was an illusion. To Emma it looked fragile, vulnerable. Teams split, moving toward designated entry points. Marshall gestured to Emma, "With me." They entered a service tunnel beneath one of the towers. The air was damp, the echo of their boots magnified in the narrow space. Radios crackled with updates. Upper floors cleared. No contact. Something gnawed at Emma. Too easy, too quiet. She scanned the concrete walls, the condensation dripping, the hum of generators. Then her eyes caught something, faint lines of chalk on the tunnel floor. Not random, markings, directional. Her chest tightened. She crouched, tracing one with her gloved finger. Symbols she remembered. Alfred's men used them for navigation in hostile environments. Silent guides. She whispered, "They were here." Marshall crouched beside her. "Recently." Emma nodded. "Hours, maybe less." Then a voice burst through comms. "Sir, we found something. Sublevel storage." They followed the call, down a stairwell, into a cavernous sub-basement, and there, stacked neatly against the wall, were barrels. Emma's stomach dropped. She stepped closer. The markings were right this time. The weight, the seals, the chemical warning tags half scraped but visible. Her hands trembled. "It's VX." Operators spread, securing the area, but Emma barely heard them. Her pulse roared in her ears. She had been right. She had pointed them true. Relief should have come. Instead, guilt surged harder. Because if she had been wrong, if she had chosen King's Cross instead, the trains would already be silent, filled with bodies. She pressed her forehead against the cold concrete, whispering, "Not again. Please, not again." Then a sound, footsteps. Not theirs. From the far side of the basement, a door creaked open. Figures emerged, rifles raised. Alfred's men. Gunfire erupted. The basement thundered with echoes. Emma dove behind a barrel stack, heart hammering, knowing a single puncture could end them all. Bullets sparked against metal. She fired back, every shot measured, precise. Through the chaos, she glimpsed a man at the rear, taller, scar across his cheek, eyes sharp and cold. Her breath caught. Alfred. He wasn't supposed to be here. Leaders didn't risk themselves at staging sights. But there he was, watching the firefight with calm calculation. For a split second, their eyes met. And in that look, Emma felt it, recognition. He knew her. He remembered her, the infiltrator who had lived in his shadow, the ghost who had run. He lifted a finger, pointed at her across the chaos, and smiled. Then he vanished into the shadows, his men covering his retreat. Emma surged forward, shouting, "It's him, he's here." But Marshall's arm yanked her back hard. Not now, not at the cost of the gas. She froze, torn between duty and vengeance, between the barrels that could drown London and the man who had haunted her for years. Alfred was slipping away, but the gas remained. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Why does it always have to be both? What do you do when vengeance stands in front of you, but thousands of lives hang behind you?" The basement of Canary Wharf thundered with gunfire. Muzzle flashes lit the shadows, sparks ricocheted off steel. Operators shouted, boots scraping against concrete as they maneuvered around barrel stacks that could unleash silent death with a single puncture. And through the chaos, Emma Hayes had seen him. Mustafa Alfred, scarred face, eyes sharp, lips curled into the smallest smile. Recognition burned between them like fire rekindled. 14 weeks inside his network, pretending loyalty, studying his habits, memorizing his tells, Emma knew his presence wasn't coincidence. He was here for her. Now he was slipping away into the service tunnels, his men covering his retreat with disciplined bursts. Emma's body surged forward on instinct, the cig raised, finger ready. But Marshall's grip slammed into her vest, dragging her down behind cover. "Not now," he barked. "We lose those barrels, London dies." Emma's chest heaved. Her mind tore in two. One part screamed to chase Alfred, to finish what she had started years ago, to stop the man who had stolen her sleep and filled her chest with ghosts. The other part, the soldier part, knew Marshall was right. She pressed her back to the concrete, breathing hard, whispering to herself, "Not vengeance, not now." But the whisper didn't soothe her. Gunfire raked the stacks. Emma gritted her teeth, leaned out, fired. One hostile fell, another scrambled. Rivera's voice cut through the comms, "Flank right clear, push forward." Emma surged with them, weaving between barrels, her pulse hammering with every step. Her shots were measured, controlled. Each one found its mark. She hated how natural it felt, how steady her hands were in the storm. In minutes, the last hostile dropped. Silence slammed down. Only the echo of spent brass rolling across concrete remained. Emma stood, chest heaving, scanning the space. The barrels loomed, menacing in their stillness. She approached slowly, hand brushing one cold steel surface. VX, enough to suffocate the city above. Marshall's voice was tight. "Containment team, get down here. Secure and transport, double seal everything." Emma closed her eyes. Relief should have come. Instead, emptiness hollowed her out, because Alfred had walked free, and he had looked at her like the game was only just beginning. Hours later, dawn bled across the Thames. Emma stood on the riverside, helmet in her hands, hair damp with sweat. Canary Wharf's glass towers gleamed in the early light, a skyline still alive only because of the choices made below its foundations. Rivera joined her, handing her a water bottle. "You saved a city." Emma's voice was flat. "We didn't stop him." Rivera studied her. "No, but we stopped this." She gestured at the towers, at the commuters already beginning to stream across bridges, oblivious to how close death had come. Sometimes that has to be enough. Emma stared at them. Families, workers, children clutching parents' hands, all breathing, laughing, unaware. Relief mingled with guilt inside her like oil and water. Marshall approached, expression hard but eyes carrying something softer beneath. "Hayes, you kept your focus when it mattered. That's why London's still standing." Emma turned to him, voice raw. "And what about Alfred? How many more cities before we finally end him?" Marshall didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence told her everything. Back at the temporary command post, analysts pored over new intel. Yassir's capture had given them fragments, routes, names, possible safe houses. None of it certain. Emma stood at the edge, arms folded, listening but distant. She felt Rachel's absence like a bruise. The friend she had lied to, left behind in Montana. She wondered if Rachel had seen the headlines by now. Eagle Ridge freshman linked to military raid in London. She wondered if the betrayal still burned. Marshall's voice pulled her back. "We'll hunt Alfred, but that's tomorrow. For now, get some rest." Rest, the word felt foreign. Emma stepped outside, the London air cool against her skin. She walked along the river until the noise of command faded. She pulled the photograph from her vest pocket, her and her mother at Camp Pendleton. She traced the handwriting on the back. "Your courage will light the way home." Her chest ached. She whispered to the river, to the skyline, to the memory of her mother, "I don't even know where home is anymore." A quiet voice came from behind. Victor Thompson, the old guard who had seen too many wars. He stood with his hands clasped behind him, eyes on the water. "Home isn't a place, Sergeant," he said softly. "It's the people who keep breathing because you chose to carry the weight. That's all it ever is." Emma swallowed hard. His words sank deep, cutting through the tangle of guilt and exhaustion. She stared at the city, alive because of choices she wished she didn't have to make. And for the first time, she accepted that her life might never be about dorm rooms and study groups, about art classes and late-night laughter. Maybe her life would always be about this, about carrying the weight so others didn't have to. Marshall's voice echoed in her memory, "We need you now." And maybe he was right. She slid the photograph back into her vest, straightened her shoulders, breath deep. London stirred awake around her, horns honking, trains rumbling, laughter carrying across bridges. She stood still, a quiet figure against the skyline, knowing that Alfred was still out there, knowing the fight wasn't over. But for today, for this moment, she had given a city back its mourning. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.